The most haunted is a phrase used probably far too often. And how would you even measure such a thing? People have tried. You can find lists of most haunted homes, cities, states, etc. all over the internet. Mainstream publications like National Geographic and Forbes even write about such things. Yeah, Forbes has weighed into the most haunted debates. But if you were to ask anyone what the most haunted city in America is, chances are they'll say New Orleans. And if you were to ask what the most haunted house is in the United States, chances are high that a home near New Orleans tops the list. The Myrtles Plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana. Tonight, I discuss the history of the Myrtles Plantation, a history that perfectly mixes legend and fact to create a unique destination for skeptics and believers alike. What's real? What's fake? And what's it like to stay the night in the most haunted house in America? This is a study of strange. Welcome to the show. I'm Michael May. Here we are stepping into the Halloween season with the Myrtles Plantation. And tonight my guest has stayed at the Myrtles Plantation. And this man, a filmmaker, and sincerely one of my favorite writers in Hollywood.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. This is Bill Whirity. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. So the Myrtles, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a bed and breakfast today. There's also like a restaurant. You can take tours.
I don't know if there was a restaurant when I went there.
Oh, really? There's a restaurant.
It was 10 years ago when I was there. This was 2012. I was filming a movie in Shreveport, and then when we wrapped, I was like, well, I'm going to go to New Orleans, and this was on the way. And our mutual friend, Rich Walgamuth, had stayed here before when he was filming in Louisiana, and he's the one that told me about it. And I'll talk about his story.
Oh, good, because I didn't realize that. I'm excited to hear that. Yeah, they have a restaurant today. I've obviously dived into a lot of research. They have a restaurant there. I don't know if it's in the house. It may be on a different thing on the property.
Maybe they opened up the dining room.
Ooh, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I met you through horror movies and scary things, and you want to make horror movies and scary movies. But there's more to having you on this episode than just being a filmmaker that likes scary stories, and that's because you can actually comment on those experiences that you may have had. So I'm looking forward to it. However, first, before we get into your story, I'm going to save it for the end. I'm going to do some history first.
Yeah, let's start.
But let me ask you right away, what was your kind of inspiration to stay there? Did you just go because it was fun, or did you want to investigate? Did you want to debunk? Like, why do it?
It was, I went there because I was like, from what Rich told me, it sounded like a cool haunted place, and I was like, maybe I'll see a ghost. Which, I'm sort of in that half in, half out, because I'm a very scientific thinker, not very religious. So it's like, I believe in ghosts kind of, but then also like, don't know if I do. It's like one of those things where I don't try to disprove it. It's like I kind of want to see it. But then once you're in the thick of it and you're there by yourself, all of a sudden you're like, I don't want to see a ghost anymore.
Yep. And the stories, because I'm in a similar boat. I'm a skeptic, but I want to believe. I love ghost hunting. I love the experiences. I love the stories. I love the places. But there is something about hearing things, like when you go and you take the tour and they talk about the mirror and they talk about the plantation and some of the history, that has an effect on your belief, even if you go in being a full skeptic. I feel like it's gonna affect you in some way. So let me do a little housekeeping real quick. Sorry. Right now, everybody, thank you all for listening and supporting the show. We do have a giveaway on Patreon right now. I think it's for like the next 30 days. So you can check out information for that on astudyofstrange.com. Also, if you like the pod, or if you don't like the pod, but you like hearing me, I don't know, that's a weird thing to say, but the point is, subscribe. Subscribing is really important for everybody in
and
the
review.
podcasting.
If you don't like it, tell them what you don't like.
Tell me what you don't like. Exactly. And also, you can email me ideas for stories, things that you think I got wrong, opinions, astudyofstrange@gmail.com. And
what's the giveaway, by the way? You said it, but what are you giving away?
Yeah, it's funny because I've gotten to a habit of not saying what it is, and I really should be doing that. So it's a you get a personalized video from me for anybody that signs up for any level on Patreon, and I'm going to have some fun with that. So that's what's going on. Also, have you left a review, Bill? Have you listened?
I did.
Oh, did you really?
I did.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice.
I texted you emailed you right after I did it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that. So what I'm going to do, I've done history before. No, I've done research into the history of the plantation, and I think it's just going to be more interesting for everybody to kind of hear the history and some of the most famous haunted tales before we actually get into like your personal experiences.
Sure.
But feel free to comment on them because, as I'm sure people can assume, there are a lot of different versions of some of these stories.
Yeah.
And a lot of the, like, I wanted to find old newspaper articles and stuff like that, which you can't find some of. But especially in the 1800s, I think most of that research, if you really want to get into records, you have to go to like LSU and go to the library and stuff, which I obviously can't do from California right now.
Microfiche rooms.
Right. Oh, God, I love microfiche. Yeah. But I think the history is going to give some credence or some validity or some weight to if it is haunted and if you do believe in those things. I think the history is why that would be the case. I mean, that's generally the assumption with spirits and ghosts. If you are a believer, when you hear these stories about the Myrtles Plantation, it's kind of easy to believe it's haunted. But I think if you're a skeptic, it's kind of just as easy to debunk. And I don't know if you'll fully agree with that, and you don't have to. In fact, it may be interesting if you don't agree with me on it as we go through, Bill. But like some of the photos of spirits, I'm like, no, that's fake. Some of the stories I've already been able to debunk. So, so that's why I say it's kind of, but there's enough there. There's enough history there. There's enough things going on that's like, it's easy to believe it and it's easy to not believe it, depending on where you land in the paranormal belief system. So up front, I'm going to mention that Myrtles Plantation, they typically say they have 12 ghosts, that there have been 10 murders over the 200 years of existence. Some of that is true. Some of that is false. One thing I'll point out right away, I've been reading books and looking at the millions of YouTube videos and articles you can find online. I find very little actually mentioned about the day-to-day life of slavery on the plantation. There are anecdotes. There's obviously a famous ghost. You and I have already talked off, I almost said off camera, but off microphone a little bit about. So there are like anecdotal stories, but there's not a lot of history of slavery on the plantation, which it was a working plantation, so there was slavery. Life could not have been good, which I think is if a place is haunted and if it's tied to emotion and energy and all that kind of stuff, I would imagine that slavery is a huge part of that. So it's actually, I find it very disappointing that you don't know more about it on the property.
Yeah, most of the stories are about what the goings on in the house.
In the house itself, yeah. All right, so here we are, the history of the Myrtles Plantation. It is in St. Francisville, Louisiana. And in 1794, a deputy attorney general, a guy named David Bradford of Pennsylvania, he always wanted a house by a swamp, which I don't judge him on. As one does. Yeah, I'm from Florida. I actually do like swamps. He would get his chance because he was a major player in the Whiskey Rebellion, and he had to flee Pennsylvania. And I went down a rabbit hole of research on the Whiskey Rebellion, and I was like, no, that's not the episode. It's Halloween time. Let's talk about ghosts. What am I doing?
What was he fleeing from?
So the Whiskey Rebellion it's essentially a tax put on certain libations, like creation and selling of it, in the early days of the United States government. And a lot of people rebelled, especially in Pennsylvania. There were riots, there were fights, things were set on fire.
Gotcha.
And George Washington sent in the military, and it was like the first show of might from the federal government early on in the country's history. So Bradford was one of the people as part of the rebellion. He had to leave, otherwise he might have gone to prison.
Yeah. Was he rebelling because he was in that industry? Like, did he create?
I don't think he was in the industry, but it was more of like supporting people in the industry, and also he may have drank, I don't know, so you're having to pay more for your whiskey now. Whatever the case, he was involved in that and he had to flee. Now it's funny because there are a lot of stories that there's like valiant stories of him jumping out of his second floor window and landing on his horse and escaping at night and getting in gunfights with soldiers chasing him. None of that's true. He actually just kind of like moseyed out of town. I was like, I should leave because I might go to prison. So it's really funny to come across those things. The truth is that they might not have even wanted to arrest him because it would have caused more fighting, and they just kind of wanted stuff to chill out.
Okay.
Like, that was the plan from the government. It's like, just calm down, please.
Yeah. So this might just be the story he told people when he got to Louisiana.
Yeah, absolutely. Louisiana is not part of the country at the time. That's why he can escape to there and get away from this.
Pre-purchase?
Yes. It is part of France. So he ends up, a couple years after he escapes from the rebellion, he ends up building a modest 8-bedroom home that he called Laurel Grove. And then he was acquitted, I think in 1798 or 1799, he was acquitted by the then president, who I think was Adams. I think it was John Adams.
Okay.
And so he went back up to Pennsylvania. He got his family because he had a wife and kids.
Oh, he left them.
Yeah, he had to leave them.
Solo.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he had got the family.
Very valiant.
Yeah. Got the family, moved them down to the property. Oh, my notes. They just Laurel Grove. There we go. He got his family and moved them down to the property Laurel Grove. And some say that he cursed the land. And this is because again, this is just legend. There's no proof to any of this. But apparently there was a Tunica, which is a native tribe, a burial ground on the property. And he dug up the remains and set them on fire. That's, again, just part of the lore. A very dramatic scene I could easily see in a movie.
Yeah.
But that supposedly might have cursed the property.
Interesting. That's also how you get rid of ghosts on Supernatural, is you burn the bones.
Ooh.
Some of them burn the bones, and then the ghosts go away, apparently. So maybe he was trying to do that?
Maybe.
I don't know.
He later died in 1808, and the plantation was left to Bradford's wife, but around 1817. Reports actually vary on this, but it's around 1817. Some say like 1820, 1850.
And so it's
whatever.
A working plantation.
It is a working plantation, yeah.
Home. Okay.
Around 1817, it was purchased by Bradford's daughter, Sarah Matilda, and her husband, Clark Woodruff. There you go, the Woodruff name you were looking for. He was a...
So they didn't even gift it to him. Didn't will it to him. Just
I think he willed it to his wife, and then Sarah purchased it from her mom. But it may not have been for any amount of money. She just legally took over ownership of the property.
Gotcha.
And people, there are a lot of people that know the history of this place better than me, even though I've been reading a lot. So let me know if I'm wrong. A studyofstrange@gmail.com. I will correct it. Some reports say that Sarah Matilda was 19 when she got married. Some say she was 14, but it looks like she actually was 19. I do think she was an adult. They had 3 kids, Cornelia, James, and Mary. Some accounts only claim 2 kids, Cornelia and James, but they had 3. Now, here's where we get into one of the most important tales of the Myrtles Plantation, a situation that gave rise to one of the most renowned ghosts on the property, Chloe, the slave Chloe. Mm-hmm. Now, legend says that Clark had an affair, and it was with Chloe. And
I didn't hear this.
Oh, yeah, that's part of some of what you read is that an affair happened. The usual story, I just banged my microphone. The usual story is that she was eavesdropping over like business or something, had her ear up to the door. And
as a punishment, they cut it off.
They cut off her ear. It was a left ear, and she had to wear like a green turban or scarf around her head to kind of hide the scarring. But yeah, there are some accounts that say they were having an affair. But again, all of that's just kind of like lore. Yeah. And people have varying stories on these things. So
are people saying that that's why he cut her ear off?
No, I think it's like they were having an affair, and I think she was either caught and so like I can't remember exactly what it was about the affair, but like the eavesdropping came later. Okay. But like the affair was part of all the shenanigans going on in the home.
Gotcha. Okay.
But most stories claim the ear cut off because she was eavesdropping.
Yeah, because he was a man about town, like, you know, kind of high in society. So you have people over in like the lounge area. Yep. They'd be doing their typical gossip, and she'd be listening in.
And then you were telling me, because I did read about this, but I didn't go too much into it in my notes, but you were telling me that she was a house slave, right? Yeah,
the way that they told us the story when I was there was that she worked in the house, mostly tending to the family and the children. And yeah, after she got caught eavesdropping, you know, she was worried about I think it was after she got caught eavesdropping, she was worried about being sent back to like the work area.
Yeah, you want to be in the house, right? Because that's the better job. You're not as grueling.
I mean, I guess you say it's a better job.
Yeah, exactly. Comparatively. So after this, Chloe came up with a plan to get back in the good graces of the family. Now, again, this is told kind of 2 ways. Mm-hmm. She either plans to bake the cake to get back into good graces, like she bakes a cake for one of the children's birthdays.
Yeah.
and she uses the essence or basically oleander plant.
Yeah, which grows in the area, which is poisonous. It's kind of a Munchausen by proxy situation where the thought process, or at least what we were told, was that she'd bake this poisonous cake, and then the kids would get sick, and they would be, they would want to keep her in the house to tend to the kids and like kind of nurse them back to health. So that was sort of the plan that we were told by the
that's what I read too. I think some accounts just leave that out. They were just she just wanted to get back at him, so she poisoned the cake. So I think some people skip the step of like the thinking that she wanted to take care of the kids to get back into like good standing.
To stay where she was and not get sent out.
However, it was too much poison, and she ended up killing Sarah Matilda and two of their kids, I think Cornelia and James.
It's important to know that I think this was when Woodruff was out of town, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he was not in town when this happened.
Yeah. And she was held responsible, Chloe again, held responsible for this, and the slaves kind of turned against her because they didn't want to be probably punished by proxy.
When he got back in town. That's what the big worry was.
So they hung Chloe, and then dumped her body into the swampland. Some accounts say that they like weighted her body down, but I'm from Florida. You can just use the swamp. There's gators. You don't need to weight it down. But yeah, they killed her, and the story is that now Chloe still is on the property today, sometimes seen with the scarf or turban on her head very vividly. Some accounts only see her from like the waist up, apparently. Some don't. Frances Kermeen, who lived and owned the property in the 80s, I read her book. She has a very vivid scene with Chloe on like one of her first nights in the house. Oh, wow. And I'll get to that a little bit later because I'll review her book a little bit.
And the famous photo of her is like what they sell in the gift shop as like, a postcard. And
stuff. Yeah. So the famous picture is from 1992, apparently. And I think it was for like insurance purposes. They needed pictures of the property. And in between, the picture's up on my computer. In between sort of two parts of the property, you can see this womanly kind of shadow figure. The house is sort of shaped
like an L. So there's like the main front row of all the houses, and then there's this little space in between the foot of the L, and then like the little nub is at least at that point it was where you check in for reception. So in that little outdoor sort of breezeway is where she's standing. You can find the photo
if you just it's like the most famous photo from the plantation in terms of the haunts of the plantation. So it's easy to find, and people can give their own opinion about it. I don't take a lot of I don't give a lot of weight to this picture personally, but again, that's just me.
What was interesting, so in the lobby of the area where I was staying, they have a display case, and it's filled with single earrings.
So she takes them or something
supposedly
like that?
She would take people who stayed there's earrings, but since she only had one ear, she would only take one of them. So people would leave, they wouldn't find their earring, and then like weeks later it would turn up and the maids would find it. So they just kind of have this collection of single earrings.
Oh, that's kind of creepy. Yeah. The story of Chloe, though, is pure legend because there are no records of a slave named Chloe. I think Frances, who owned the property again, and I read her book, I think she ended up, I read in an interview that she found some potential records of a slave named Chloe, but who was 14, but there's no, again, it's kind of hard to like confirm, is this the Chloe everybody talks about? Or is it just legend? Is it just legend and lore that kind of grew?
Or is it just something where there was no record of it at the time too?
Exactly. But here's the thing. The reality is that on July 21st, 1823, Sarah Matilda died because of yellow fever, which was like a huge issue in the area at the time.
Interesting.
Then on July 15th, a year later, 1824, her son James died from yellow fever. And then 2 months later in September, Cornelia, the other daughter, died from yellow fever. So they did not die together. They were not poisoned. They died from yellow fever years apart.
Gotcha.
And also, again, they had 3 children, not just 2, which is sometimes kind of ignored or overlooked or forgotten about in this story. Mary, the other daughter, survived, and she kept living throughout life. So yes, records are bad, which aids in creating mysteries because it's hard to prove and people fill in the gaps with their own
Now, what are
thinking.
the symptoms of oleander poisoning versus yellow fever?
They're not. They're no. It's completely different because yellow fever is even a disease. Yeah, it's very different. I'm not one to comment specifically on how it's different, but they are, they're very different. And yellow fever was a huge, I don't know if it was technically a pandemic at the time, but it was spreading and running rampant.
Okay.
So the signs of that are very well known to the doctors at the time.
Yeah.
What I don't know, and I would love if anybody out there knows, please contact me about this. I don't know if when Sarah Matilda and two of her kids died, if they died on the property or not.
Oh.
Because that would be part of this story too.
Yeah, that's true.
Whether Chloe's real or not, if they died on the property, I think that's really interesting. But
I'm sure you're going to talk about. I think it was Woodruff, right? He died on the property. I'm sure you're getting there next.
Are you talking about the shot?
Yeah.
Oh no, that's I'm going to get there soon, but that's someone else. But
okay.
yeah, he died there as well.
Okay.
So we'll get to that. So I don't mean to say any of this to like debunk the story, but I do think one of my personal issues with ghost stories is not taking into account what you can prove or disprove. Because like if it's haunted, let it be haunted. Let's find out why it's haunted. Don't lie about the stories. Don't stick to your story.
Yeah. To
like be open to the changes and things. So anyway, the next official owner of the property was Rufin Grace Sterling, and he's the one that actually renamed it to the Myrtles Plantation. And he named it that based on the crepe myrtle trees that were on the property. He restored the house, kind of grew the house, made it big and elegant and kind of what it is today. I think he's the one that also added the 125-foot long veranda, the like long porch, as I would call it.
Yeah.
Legend says that Sterling's son was shot in the game room over a gambling debt and died on the floor, and people trip over his body or see blood spots. That is a story I can not confirm. Sterling died on the 17th of July in 1854 of consumption. I just always love talking about consumption because it's tuberculosis.
For the longest time, I thought it was drinking yourself to death.
Yeah,
and
me too.
Until recently, I found out that it was tuberculosis.
Yeah, it's tuberculosis. Yeah. So when Sterling died, his daughter took over the property. She married in 1852 a guy named William Drew Winter, and they ended up eventually taking over the Myrtles Plantation. They had a daughter named Kate. Now, did you hear anything about a Kate? Does that ring a bell?
I mean, I probably wouldn't remember the name. I might remember the story associated with it.
So the story is that Kate was 2 years old, yes, and she had yellow fever, and she was confined to her bedroom, and a voodoo priestess was brought in to try to save her. And when she couldn't save her, the family got upset with her, kind of kicked her out, and she supposedly like cursed the property or something. And the story is that her name was Cleo or Chloe, which is obviously similar or the same as Chloe, the other story. And some people say that she had a green turban as well. So there are like conflicting, competing stories. I think Myrtles Plantation sticks to the story we already shared earlier, but there are other people that are like, no, man, that's not the right Chloe, man. They have the wrong Chloe.
Interesting. Yeah, I was trying to remember what the voodoo priestess story was because I remember the ghost instances of it, but I couldn't remember the original. Yeah,
so it has something to do with trying to save Kate, Kate Winter.
Do you want me to go into the ghost story now, or we'll cover that stuff?
Well, is it about the voodoo priestess?
Yeah, I think so. There's the room where they see her face like in the window.
You can tell that now. Okay. That seems tied in. Yeah, go for it.
So one of the stories that they told us, and I don't know if it's important to lay this out now or later, but like the way that the bed and breakfast portion of it is there's like the master suite, which is a whole section of the house, which is what I stayed in. I rented that. They give you like an old skeleton key, which is like the only key to get into
that's awesome.
That sort of, I don't want to say wing because it's just like the end cap of the house. And you have the entire section. So there was like a room on the first floor, which I think was called either like the yellow or the gold room, which they don't rent anymore. And that was even locked to me. They take you on it during the tour, but it's too haunted to rent out is like what they say, because that's where in the window on the outside, sometimes people would see the face of the voodoo priestess. There was some time, I think it was in the 90s, the Oprah Winfrey Show was going to do a story on the place.
Yeah, I read about this.
Did you read about this? Yeah. And one of the producers stayed there. She stayed in that room and woke up in the middle of the night and saw like a body hanging from the ceiling and ran out of the room and like never came back, and they never filmed an episode there. And since then they don't rent that out anymore, like, so it remains locked. So I was staying in the room right above that, and so every time I had to go up the stairs, I'd walk past that door. And so again, just more creepy stuff where you're standing, plus you're not near the other guests. Like the other guests, which are on the other side of the house, have a separate entrance. There is a connecting door, but now that's locked because they realized people were renting both and having parties, and it was just become a little too destructive. Yeah. So everyone else has a shared hallway, and then they just have their individual rooms, whereas I'm just sequestered in this totally separate part of the house, which made it extra scary. But so that was the story with that room and the voodoo priestess. But I was trying to remember what the origin of it was.
I wonder if the Kate story is the origin of that. I'm sure like other more kind of legend stories. I'm sure there's probably some variations to it, but yeah, that's when I first came across it.
Because I was trying to remember if it was a turban.
Priestess.
I remember hearing something with a snake around her neck or something along those
lines.
lines.
I never came across any of that.
Maybe that was just, I don't know if I'm remembering that, but that's when they saw her in the wind, like looking outside in the window.
Now, during the Civil War, the house was allegedly ransacked by Union soldiers. The family was going through difficult financial times, and by 1867, they were bankrupt, and the Myrtles was sold by the U.S. Marshal to the New York Warehouse and Security Company. And 2 years later, however, somehow the family was able to get back on their feet again after the war. Because you can imagine South money, the Confederate money was worth like nothing. So a lot of people were obviously going through financial hardships after the war. But 2 years later, they were able to get things back together again, and they were able to buy the property back. So Mrs. Sarah Winter was able to get the Myrtles Plantation back. And now here's where we have a true story, and one that's actually like validated by old documents, newspapers, all sorts of things. And that is the only real murder to actually have taken place on the plantation that we know about. Did you hear about the 17th step?
Yes, that's the one I was waiting for you to get
to. Nice. Now, do you have your own personal story for that? Because we may wait on that, or do you?
We can wait on that. It's not my personal story; it's Rich's story, and then I'll go into my story.
Okay, we're gonna wait on that because right now we're gonna do a reenactment of the story of why there is something to do with the 17th step. And I'll give a little background here. It's 1871. William Winter, who owned the property, was teaching a Sunday school class in one of the rooms on the property, and he heard a horse ride up, and someone called for him. So let me make sure.
I heard. For some reason, I feel like this was in the middle of the night. I didn't know that he was teaching a school.
Well, again,
class.
variations of stories. Like even if the murder is real, like I'm sure there's probably different tales, legends that are told. Let me just make sure this is the right scene. Yes.
Sure.
Okay. So you're gonna read William.
Okay. Appropriate.
So you're William Winter. Yeah, exactly.
William Whirity and William Winters.
Billy Winter.
As I mentioned earlier, I went to school with Bill Winters. He was a couple years older than me.
Hundreds of years older.
This
was William Winter's ghosts. So it's 1871 on the Myrtles Plantation. It's a lovely day, and inside the home, a group of children sit on the floor looking up at William Winter, who is teaching a Sunday school class.
Very good, James. And Mary, if you'd like to say something, remember to raise your hand.
From outside, there's the sound of a horse approaching quickly. William looks out the window. From outside, "Mr. Winter, come outside. I know you're in there." William turns to the kids.
Pardon me, children. Nothing to worry yourselves about.
"William Winter, come out now."
Wait here. I'll be right back.
William leaves the room, and the children listen to him opening the front door and walking onto the veranda. He then speaks to the man.
"There are children inside."
Gunshots. The children scream. The man on the horse is heard galloping away. Some of the children are courageous enough to look out the window. The horse is too far away to make out who the mysterious shooter was. Moments later, the door burst open and William falls into the foyer floor, hard to say, covered in blood. He then begins pulling himself up the stairs.
Sarah! Sarah! Sarah!
Sarah appears at the top of the stairs and runs to William. She holds him and cries as William dies in her arms. The Sunday school children watch from the ground floor, horrified.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Yes, so that is...
Yeah, the version I heard was that this rider came in the middle of the night, awoke him from bed. He told his wife to stay inside. He went outside, confronted the man, was shot, and then climbed up the stairs where he died on the 17th step.
On the 17th step. So yes, whatever version of that story is correct.
Yeah. And now these are the interior staircase. So this was, there's the porch stairs, the front doors, then you go up the other stairs. So now that is again in the section of the house where I was staying by myself. Mm-hmm. So like... the front door's locked. That's the one I had the key to. And then there was the staircase that went up to my room. So that's where he died. So
I'll mention this one thing before I tell you some of the stuff that I learned. And this is actually in most of the information I read historically gets this quote unquote correct. So before I share that though, the Frances Kermeen book, who again, she owned the property in the 80s. She shares her story of when she first learned about the 17th step, and that was through like friends of a friend.
Okay.
So she didn't even know about it because all these other haunting stuff was apparently happening to her, but she didn't know about that, and some women were there, and I'm probably butchering her story, so I apologize. But they were like, oh, and the 17th step, and just sort of like offhandedly comment, and she was like, wait, what? What
is that?
And then that's kind of how she started to learn that story. But in fact, historically, William Winter died outside on the porch. So he was shot and died right out there outside. Yeah, it's interesting how, it's a game of telephone. Stories like ghost stories are games of telephone. They change over time.
Maybe it was the seventh step on the porch.
Could have been the seventh step.
17.
Could have just been someone misheard the story, or you don't know how they start, but it definitely becomes this game of telephone. Yeah. And I'm not saying this to like debunk anything, because if weird stuff happens in the 17th step, maybe it's just not William Winter. Yeah, maybe it's something else.
Yeah.
So anyway, he did die outside. A gentleman named, did I write his name down? Yes, I did. A gentleman named E.S. Weber apparently went to trial as the murderer.
Oh.
But the records kind of disappear after that. So I think he was probably not charged. I think he probably got off, because apparently the story is that the kids, if there were kids, whatever witnesses did exist, never saw who it was, apparently. So if it was someone named E.S. Winter, there wasn't
reliable
enough
witnesses.
Yeah, exactly.
Close enough.
But yeah, very, very interesting story.
Yeah. So I'm going to really quickly tell Rich's story.
Yeah.
So my friend Rich, he was down there filming a movie. I forget if this was before or after. It was around Katrina, because they did have to evacuate eventually.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Yeah. And, so he was staying there. He knew about the ghost stories, and he stayed in the same room. And he told me that this is why, again, the story was at night, that they told him, at a certain hour, you often hear his body collapsing on the stairs.
Oh, wow.
So he set an alarm to wake up, like a few minutes before allegedly you hear the sound, so that he could actually be awake and hear it. And a few minutes before his alarm went off, he woke up to the sound of what he described as, it sounded like somebody dropping like an armful of books down the stairs.
Wow.
So he just like bolted up in bed before his alarm went off a few minutes before, like supposedly when this happened. And yeah, that was his sort of, and he went out there and there was nothing there, obviously. So that's the story that I heard. That was his experience with it. Again, who knows if it was directly outside the room. Maybe it could have been on the front porch steps. Someone carries. It's very quiet out there in the middle of nowhere. So that was his story with that. So I went there, staying there to hopefully get that same experience. And I'll tell my whole story after everything, but I'll explain why that didn't get to happen.
That's amazing.
I wish I could remember the time too.
I know. That's what I was going to ask, because a time comes up in Francis's book. She talks about 3 a.m. a lot.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious to hear some other stories related to time. I'm trying to remember if it was
that late. We'll have to, maybe we can text Rich and ask him.
So in 1878, to continue on, Sarah Winter dies. Allegedly, I think this is in like most articles. I think even Wikipedia, it says that she died of a broken heart. Mary Cobb Sterling, Sarah's mother, was in charge of the plantation. She had it till about 1880, and then it was divided amongst her children. And one of them sold it to a gentleman named Orrin Brooks. And Brooks kept it until 1889. Now, there may have been a few other brief owners, but it was then purchased by Harrison Milton Williams, a Mississippi widower who brought his son and second wife with him. And his family eventually kind of broke up the property into even like smaller pieces. So I don't know if the plantation today is back as being like all the original land, or if it's smaller.
Okay.
I actually could not figure that out, but I do think it's smaller than it originally was.
Yeah, at the time it was just, you could rent in the main house. Looking at their website, there is a map that shows like the cottages and stuff. So I don't know if they rent all those other things out.
I think they do. I think they do.
So they must have expanded that out then.
Yeah. So in 1942, there's kind of a break in stories, like dramatic stories for a while. In 1942, a caretaker, this is all alleged, I cannot find any confirmation of this, was apparently murdered by a robber. I do mention this because there are a lot of other unconfirmed stories. We'd literally have to do like 12 episodes to cover them all. But I mention this one because there are some ghost claims of like a grumpy caretaker.
Okay.
I just love the idea of a grumpy ghost. Not a scary ghost, but like a grumpy ghost.
Just ornery.
Yep, exactly. In 1950, it was purchased by Marjorie Munson. And this is about the time that kind of ghost stories start getting passed around, but like locally, not nationally or internationally like the Myrtles Plantation today, just kind of like local stories. It went through a few other owners into the 1970s, including a gentleman named John L. Pierce, who by this time there were tours of the property, so it was like a tourist destination kind of thing, but it was more about the history of plantations in the South. They were not marketing it as haunted, ghost stories, any of that. It was just old-fashioned plantation. And then in 1980, Frances Kermeen purchased the property with her then husband, James Myers, who she sometimes refers to as Jim in her book. Now, it's under their ownership that the legend actually begins to grow. And it appeared in the New York Times. It started appearing in other things. And the Myrtles starts to become the quote-unquote most haunted home in the nation is when Frances takes over.
And are they renting it at this point? Like, is there a marketing ploy maybe behind that?
I don't think there's... So her story, I'm actually going to get into her story because I find it really interesting. And it was the sort of the most in-depth book I read on the subject. I don't want to like just synopsize, that's not the appropriate language, the entire book, because go buy it if you're interested. Yeah. Like she actually does a very good job with the book. I think she published it in the early 2000s, so it was after she owned it, because she owned it from 1980 to 1990.
Okay, because it seems like a weird thing to promote unless you're trying to sell a book or get people to stay there for like haunted evenings, because selling a stigmatized property becomes an additional like hurdle, I would imagine, unless there's
especially back then. I think today calling a place haunted, probably there's a business to that.
Yeah, but it's a very small subset.
Yeah, it's a small subset. At the time, I probably would not have been. But her dream, and again, I'll kind of get into this a little more in depth in a second, but her dream was to open up an inn.
Oh, okay.
So she always wanted to kind of open it to the public. And I don't know if she's the first to open it up to like people can stay there, but she's definitely when it started in terms of like modern times. Because I don't think John L. Pearson was renting it out for rooms. I know he was just giving tours. So, okay, Myers. Kermeen. She was Myers at the time.
And at this point, really quick, it's no longer... Like, when did it stop being a working plantation? Do you know?
Oh, it would have had to be at the end of the Civil War. I mean, I don't know when they stopped growing things.
Well, that's what I mean, because it could still be like a farm.
Yeah.
Is it still called a plantation if it's in the South? If
that's
people are paid and working there?
No, I don't. I honestly don't know if you stop calling it that. But it had to be a working property, I would imagine, up until probably the middle of the 20th century. I would imagine, but I cannot say because I didn't even think to look that up, to be honest. That is a good question. And please write in astudyofstrange@gmail.com. Yeah. Let me know, and I will tell everybody.
Well, it's a good point that if they're not working it as a farm, that they would have to open it as like an inn to pay the bills.
Well, especially if the property was broken up in the sort of late 1800s, early 1900s. Maybe the farm portion was off. Yeah. But again, I'm just assuming at this point. I really don't know. Now, Frances Kermeen, in my own personal theory, I actually think it's under her leadership that the haunted stories, and I already kind of said this, but I think the haunted stories grow because of her, not because of her book, because that came later. But I think she might have seen, again, my own personal theory, she does not say this in the book, but I think she might have seen some opportunity with the haunted side of things. Frances did want to turn it into an inn. That was always her dream. She grew up in California. And, let me also, I'm going to take a step back here for a second. I'm not saying the place is not haunted when I'm like, I think she's the reason it kind of became a thing. Because that's up to each and every one of us and all the listeners out there. I am a bit of a skeptic, so that's definitely my bias going into this. But I think it's important just to think of those things, to think of the motivations, and to think of the real history behind it. And some of the tales that Frances talks about in her book, I think, are easily debunked. However, when you go into the book, to give her some credit here, a lot of her tales, like the Chloe tale, like Chloe, I was able to be like, no one knows if Chloe existed. The children died because of yellow fever later on at different times. So you can kind of easily debunk that. She tells the story as if it's fact of the being poisoned. But then later chapters, she actually does debunk it. So she is very good about being like, oh, here's the thing I heard. Here's what likely happened. Gotcha. So I do want to give her credit. I don't want to make it sound like she's just pulling all this out and to try to make it sound haunted. No, she actually does a very good job. And it's a very good book. So I think everybody out there should go read it, and I'll have links to it in the show notes. So her story starts on a cruise to Haiti. Now, she was with her soon-to-be husband, Jim, And I think she was Jamaica and Haiti, but in Haiti, she had met friends on the cruise. They had gone out to explore one day when you stop, at the islands as you do on a cruise. And they came across a voodoo ceremony. And this is how the book kind of starts. And she pulled out her camera and took a picture, and the people doing the ceremony noticed it and basically like aggressively came at her and wanted the camera, wanted her to stop. And they thought she's stealing their souls. So she gets the hell out of there. And someone said that they cursed her. Okay. So that kind of starts the story. She's very good at a narrative, which is kind of my critique on her book. It's like, it sounds like you're writing a movie and not just like sharing your experience. But she gets out of there. She's apparently been cursed. And the friends she meets on the ship try to convince her to come to Louisiana with them on her way back to like California when the cruise is done. And she and her husband agree. Now, she had always wanted to own an inn, as I've said. She had always been attracted to Louisiana because I think her father was from there. And she had been to St. Francisville before on another kind of river cruise in the area. So she knew the area. So yeah, she first goes to the Myrtles on this kind of stopover in Louisiana. And she starts looking at property with her soon-to-be husband. And the Myrtles is for sale. So she tours it. She falls in love with it. But during a tour of the property, she heard a female voice call her name, and it made her feel uneasy. So she asked John L. Pearson, the owner who was giving her the tour, if there was anything unusual about the property, which I do hope she actually asked in that exact way. Anything unusual about the property? And he replied, "Don't be silly," but he wouldn't look at her in the eye when he told her the story. So,
reassuring.
Yeah. So John L. kept saying that the place was for families, and Francis actually used this as like motivation to get married, because when she's looking at the property over and over again, he's like, "This place for families, and she wasn't married yet. So she and Jim eventually got married, and I can't remember if they probably didn't get married right away, but I think they told John L. they were getting married when they were buying the property. Her first night there. So there's this weird thing in the book what I couldn't quite deduce, and I don't know if that's just me not being a good reader. Okay. But she started staying at the house when the previous owner was still there. And I think it was during closing, but he was like letting her stay at the house.
Kind of like a rent-to-own situation.
I guess so. It's a little strange. On her first night there, John L. was there as well, still living there. And Frances had a dream that she was wearing a dress that would have been like the one Sarah Matilda, who was the mother that died from poisoning, quote unquote, died from poisoning, would have worn. And this is like the first time in the book that Frances starts connecting certain things she's going through with like previous owners, or previous people that used to be on the property. Because there's more than just that. On her third night, while she was trying to sleep, the lights in her room kept turning on. So it would just be like she would turn off the lights, go to sleep, then she'd wake up and they'd be on. And she would, of course, question herself of like, wait, did I turn them off? I thought I turned them off. She'd turn them off. And this happens a number of times before she gets scared. And she goes and she sleeps on the couch outside of wherever John L.'s room was. And while she's trying to sleep, she was woken up feeling like someone was watching her. And then she noticed a figure was standing there, candle in hand, which illuminated the room. And it was a woman, a black woman in a green dress and a green turban. And she wouldn't go away. And Frances got up the courage to kind of touch the woman, and then she disappeared. Ooh. And so that's her first experience with Chloe, obviously. Okay. And she apparently she screamed for help when she first saw Chloe standing above her. And John's room is right there, and John never came to get her. And this is something that kind of happens throughout the book. Like someone will try to be getting help from somebody, and no one will show up, even though they're like right there. So that's a really interesting thing. Now, she connects herself again to the haunts by telling a story about a previous owner that she met with. I don't know how to say their name. It's like the Michels. They were very old when she met them, and they lived in California at the time. And the old woman, who was the wife in that family that had previously owned the Myrtles, she was still alive, but like really elderly, like hanging on for dear life when Frances met her. And Frances recognized her from like spirits she had seen in the house. Mm-hmm. And so some say that like people near death, you can kind of like
astral project,
kind of like that. Leave your body. So she was kind of terrified. And then she later found a receipt in the Myrtles. She found a receipt for a cruise to Haiti from that same family that she had met. And they went on the cruise right before, allegedly, they bought the Myrtles just like her. So it's this interesting connection. Something I do want to read because I think it's interesting. Frances has a friend, I think his name was Jimmy, and he told her something about the Myrtles, and I just want to read the quote from the book. He says, "Something profound happens to people at the Myrtles. Whatever your issues are, whatever your addictions, the Myrtles seems to take over and bring them out and make them worse. If you like your liquor, at the Myrtles, you'll probably become a drunk. If you're depressed, your depression will overcome you. Whatever your problems, they will be intensified. The longer you stay there, the worse it gets. So don't be surprised if the people around you begin to act crazy. They won't be able to help themselves."
Sounds more like The Overlook.
Right? There's a lot of connections to like other haunted places in terms of experiences. All right, so the next thing I'll bring up about Frances and her book, our next dramatized scene. Ooh. Bill, get excited. So this happened between Frances and Midge Soderbergh from Steven Soderbergh's family. I think it's his mom.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Frances met Midge at a party in Louisiana, and it was a party of people that would get together and actually like discuss mystical things. Okay. And they would have seances and talk about ghosts. Ooh. And so she was invited, because she's the owner of the Myrtles, to go to this party, and she got to meet Steve Soderbergh's mom, Midge. So you're going to read, so just, I guess, have you read Frances. An old Louisiana home at night. Frances and her friend Hampton are speaking with a few people in the foyer of this nice old-fashioned southern home. People are saying their goodbyes and leaving the event. It's the end of the night. A woman named Midge Soderbergh is standing in the doorway waving goodbye to some other guest. Frances and Hampton are about to leave when Midge grabs Frances's arm. Excuse me, Frances?
Yes?
Do you mind if we speak in private a moment? Frances nods to Hampton, signaling him to wait for her.
Sure.
So Midge leads Frances into an adjoining living room, which is now empty. I've been debating talking about you, to you all night about this. Afraid you would think I'm crazy.
And talk to me about what?
Frances, something evil is at the Myrtles. You are not safe there. Get out. Midge is staring directly into Frances's eyes.
I can't. I love that place, and I've spent everything I have on it.
If you won't leave, then for God's sake, be safe. Don't mess with the place. Don't have seances. Don't try to conjure spirits.
Are the spirits evil?
Most of them are fine, but there's one that's evil. I felt it there myself.
Are we really in that much danger?
I'm afraid you are. Just don't focus on them. Don't give them any energy, and perhaps they'll leave you alone. Bum, 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 bum. I always want to do that after every scene. Bum, bum, bum.
Always what you want to hear about your house.
Yeah. There's an evil entity in it. So Frances didn't listen that well, because at a later date, she actually had a seance, and her husband at the time, Jim, apparently like turned into an old woman. Like he looked like an old woman during the seance. And there's a portrait. Oh, I wanted to ask you about that. Was there a portrait, like a famous portrait they talked about at all?
There was a mirror.
I know the mirror. So apparently there's a portrait. Maybe it's not in the house anymore. There's a
portrait. It might be in like the more like not the non-living portions of the house that are just part of the tour. So I'm sure that they went through it. And
maybe. So apparently there's a portrait that Frances would talk about in her book a lot that like looks like its eyes are following you. One of those kind of paintings. And apparently at the end of the seance, that portrait it looked like the person in it was crying.
Oh, do you know what? Well,
I don't know.
Then it probably was in like the dining room, because I'd imagine that's where they would have the seance. Because I'm thinking there's a portrait that goes up the stairs of Judge Woodruff. I'm just scrolling through my photos here. I'm trying to remember a specific. I don't recall.
Yeah, no, that's all right. So I won't go into all the rest of Frances's experience. Those are just some of the highlights. I will mention that there's also like Confederate soldier stories of like seeing Confederate soldiers. Frances has one in the book that I really love, where she can see, I can't remember if it's her or a friend of hers, can see through the window outside a Confederate soldier. But if they go outside and look, he's not there. But if you look through the window, they could see him, which I just thought was a really, I don't know, I just visually, I think that's really interesting and cool. Yeah. And she also had like friends and employees that experienced a number of things. One of her employees, this young woman, told her a story about I think it was the judge who had lived there. She had seen like a spirit of him, and he would come into her room and they would have sex every night. And she was like, well, I kind of like it. So it's an interesting story. Frances went through some things that are unghost related that are actually also very dramatic, but the Myrtles is a big influence in it. One of them, which is she was going to host a prom for a prominently black high school.
Okay.
And people in the area, she started getting like threatened and life threats, and people would call and threaten her and hang up, and members of the KKK threatened her with stuff. And she kind of hung to her guns and had to like trick them to be able to pull off doing the prom. Another thing that happened is her marriage fell apart while she was there for over 10 years. And the book, I don't know how much the book, I'm sure she will say it's true, but it seemed like the hauntings and the experiences she was having with the paranormal at the house is what led to the downfall of her marriage. And she really ends it in a way of like her escaping, even though she lived there for 10 years, she kind of ends it on this dramatic kind of like escape from the property to get out of there, because it was such a terrible thing for her life.
And now are she and her husband both still alive?
I don't know about her husband. She is.
Okay.
So I've read some interviews with her. I think she's even been on some podcasts as well. But yeah, I encourage you, as much as I'm like, I don't know.
Do a follow-up episode.
Right? Yeah, it would actually be really nice to talk to her, because it is a good book. As much as I'm like, I don't know if I believe everything in it.
Yeah.
It is a good book. And she even mentions like the Amityville Horror, but there are some connections, which is partly why I'm like, some of the things I'm skeptical of, because it's like, oh, this is a very well narratively sort of told haunted house movie.
Did you copy paste this?
Or not necessarily like copy, but just understanding sort of the narrative beats of what you would want if this was to become a movie. You would want this kind of arc of a story. So it's interesting, but it is very good. So I do recommend people get in. Again, I'll have a link to it in the show notes. Now that I've covered some history, and I definitely went on a tangent of her experiences, but I think they're all interesting, and they all, they all color the story of the Myrtles Plantation. But walk me through your experience there, I guess. Like, or even how have you put thought into how you want to share it?
No, not really. I thought I'd just go kind of tell it in order. I wish there was something more kind of spooky that happened, like Rich's thing, where he was setting out to try to record the sound of the guy falling down the stairs, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And mine was sort of thwarted, but I'll get to it. So obviously I went there and checked in. This was kind of like on a whim. When the movie was ending, I was like, well, I have some extra time, go down to New Orleans. This is on the way. So I wasn't really like prepped with anything to do any sort of kind of ghost investigating. Checked in, got that sort of side of the house. I was really bummed to find out when I got there, because I got there on a Thursday, that they only do the ghost tours on Friday nights, and I had to be in New Orleans Friday.
Oh, they only do it on Friday night?
Or this was 10 years ago. This was 10 years ago. Yeah. So they still had the regular house tour. So,
good.
So they give you like a regular tour of the house. So I was able to do that. So we got to see the property. It was really cool. I think the prom story sounds familiar, because what I thought was really cool about like these style of homes is that, like, you were talking about that veranda.
Yeah.
Like, all along that, like, from the outside, you see all these like windows, but they're actually like doors, and they open it all up, and that's when they have like, almost have like a full-on ball, because like it makes the living room spread out onto the porch, so people want to dance, and like I can just imagine like, oh, this would be a great place to host a party. And so we did the normal tour. They kind of touched upon a couple ghost things, but not much.
Yeah.
So it was a little disappointing.
Yeah.
And so then I was just kind of in this other part of the house, and I actually happened to meet, I was staying up late to kind of feel it out, see if anything spooky, but I was there alone, and I actually met this other couple who was, I believe, visiting from Texas. So they're on a little vacation there, and I think they brought some beers, so we just kind of were hanging out on the porch and stuff, and they were really interested in all the ghost stuff too, so we kind of got into some of that. And there's the night sort of desk clerk, who is actually the guy that gives the ghost tours.
Oh yeah.
So we were kind of talking him up and asking him for stories, and he basically gave us an impromptu ghost tour. So he went and got the keys. He's, I think we offered him some beers or something, but he was working, so he declined.
Can I pause you just for a second, because I want to understand this, because I've been thinking about this every time I'm reading about it. I just imagine myself staying there, because I would love to do that too. Mm-hmm. I think it sounds amazing. But like, when you do stay there, because there are tours throughout the day, how do you sort of navigate that? How do you have to only show up at a certain time when you're staying the night?
I think it was a normal check-in, like 11 to 3, because the tour was basically all of the kind of public areas of the house. So the way that it's like a 2-level, home. So like my half, the section that I was in on the first floor, it has this grand foyer. There's like a like baby grand piano under the staircase, the famous 17th step staircase. Yep. There's that silvered mirror, which we'll talk about. And then there's the gold room that they no longer rent. And then you upstairs and it's the kind of master bedroom. And then the other portion of the house is like the lower level is like the dining room, ballroom area, like that sort of, I think there was like a kitchen and stuff. And then above that is where the other, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 rooms that they rent out are. So that's so when they're giving the tour, it's on the first floor mostly, and then the grounds outside. But our tour, because it was just the three of us, and then this guide, like he got the keys, kind of took us around, told us a little bit more of the stories, and we were able to go check out my room and their room because we were, it was our group. Now, what was really interesting, so as he was taking us around, like he had the key to get into like the public areas, but he didn't have the key to get into like to my area. So there's two doors like on either side. There's one in the front and one in the back that lead to this main foyer. So whenever we would go to like a place, he would be like, "Hey, I need your key. I don't have one of these keys. That's for the guest security." And so I gave him my key, and we went, and he like for some reason like checked the knob beforehand, and it was open. Yeah. Which like the thing with these locks though is like the way they're made is they auto lock behind you. Like every time I left to go anywhere, I had to constantly use the key. Like you can't like unlock it and leave it open. It's like a locks behind you. So he's like, he kind of casually was like, one of the ghosts left it open for us, which was really weird and kind of unnerving. And then the second the door closed, we checked and it had locked itself again. Like we had like the husband of the couple like stayed outside and we closed the door and he's like, yeah, no, it's locked. And what he pointed out, which was really interesting, is that all the keyholes of the house are upside down. And that's to confuse ghosts.
Oh, I read about that in something. Yeah.
And now I've always heard stories of that. Now I don't know if it's part of why, but I always also heard, because I'm from back home in an Irish neighborhood. So there's little quirks, that like in Ireland, I don't know if that's their superstition, but they install locks upside down. Same with light switches are inverted there. And stuff.
Interesting.
So in our neighborhood, because a lot of immigrants came over from Ireland, like a lot of the houses, everything's kind of like flipped. So I don't know if that was like a superstitious thing that carried over or if it's two separate things. But so I have a picture I'll go through and show you like of the keyhole upside down and stuff like that. So there's all these little like anti-ghost things that they kind of put in there. And so then he took us into, the gold room and showed them that. And because they weren't on the tour earlier, I don't believe. I think they got there later. Then we went up to my room. He kind of told us the stories there. So like,
what was your room?
So
what's the story?
My room is like this really big, it's very large, like kind of open room. And then there's this really creepy, skinny hallway that goes down the length of it to like the bathroom. And at the end of this hallway is like a window with a shade pulled. So it's just this really eerie, like straight out of a horror movie. Like anytime I had to get up to go to the bathroom, you had to walk down this hallway and there was a window at the end. And I was constantly worried I was going to like walk there and just see a silhouette.
Yep.
And just have to like bolt out of the place. And there's a big 4-post, old style bed, like kind of tucked in the corner. There's a fireplace and everything. And some of the stories with that room were that guests would be sleeping and they would feel like the mattress move down as if someone laid down next to them, and they would smell the perfume of like the lady of the house. Now I don't know whose wife that was in the timeline of all the stories, but that was like a frequent story that was told. I didn't have that experience at all.
Did your room have a name? Because I know they've named.
Yes, it was the Judge Woodruff.
Oh, you were?
Yeah,
okay,
so I was
cool.
in like the Judge Woodruff suite. And I didn't have any, obviously it was an impromptu trip, so I didn't have any ghost things, but I did have like a Rubik's Cube in my bag. So I was like, I'm just going to leave it on the fireplace and see if we wake up and it's solved. You never know.
Yeah.
But nothing of that happened. Yep. But it was funny because when I eventually did go to bed later when we separated, and you're in this room by yourself, suddenly you're like, I don't want to see a ghost anymore. And I literally had to sleep facing the wall because the 4-post bed's kind of butted right up against the wall, because just looking at the open room and then that hallway was just way too terrifying. So it took me a while to finally fall asleep, but I eventually did. Sadly, I did not hear the book thing because after we got the ghost tour, kind of stayed up late with that couple, even though I was I want to go to bed because I want to see if this like sound is going to happen. But they were, wanted to like do the ghost haunting thing. So we kind of sat on the stairs and the husband had his phone out and he was trying to do EVP recording. So he was asking questions and recording, and then we played it back, but we didn't hear anything. So he was trying to talk to the various ghosts and spirits and like the lady of the house and stuff. So we actually ended up staying up past when Rich told me, because at that time I knew what the time was. So we ended up staying up past that. And I think because we were awake, maybe the ghosts didn't want to show themselves.
Yeah.
But yeah, part of the tour, then we went over to their room, which was the Fannie Williams room. And it's very like, it was pastel colors, also had a fireplace in there. And it's also known as the doll room. Did you read about the doll?
No, I did not.
Oh.
Dolls scare me. That is one of the things that does terrify me.
So this one, there's like this old porcelain doll in this little dress. And he was showing us like old photos of the place. And he claimed, like this, it's like its expression has changed over the years. Now, I don't know if it's been touched up because, again, these were black and white photos. It still looked like it was in really good condition. But the story with it is that people that stayed in that room would constantly report things like they would leave and then they would come back and it would be, it's usually sitting on top of the fireplace mantle. It would be in like the doorway of the open door, or they would leave and go home and then open their suitcase and the doll is in their suitcase and they would call and be like, what is your address? Like, we need to send this thing back immediately. Somehow we don't know how it wound up in our suitcase. So it's like this creepy porcelain doll. Now, it was funny because before I got down there, I was staying at like a hotel on the shoot and it was in like a Walmart parking lot and they had one of those like claw machines, in like the breezeway of the Walmart. And I actually ended up like playing because I was just so bored. There's not much to do there. And I got a stuffed animal stuffed doll of Peter Venkman, like this Ghostbuster doll.
That's awesome.
So I was like, we should leave this next to that doll and see what happens in the morning. Like if the ghosts are pissed that there's a Ghostbuster doll and it's all torn up or something. Nothing like that happened. We did leave it there overnight though. I have some photos of that, which are pretty funny.
That's amazing.
But yeah, so most of it was just us. I mean, I think I just felt like we'd stayed up too long, and like kind of waited the ghosts out and stuff. And so that was a bit of a bummer. But the door thing was, I guess, the creepiest thing where that was unlocked. But,
that is interesting. There's a story that Frances has in her books of one of the first times I think it was after she had purchased the house and was there alone, and she got like locked into a section of the house.
Oh yeah,
and,
I could easily see that happening.
They couldn't unlock it, whatever. But yeah, that's an interesting point.
Now, I don't remember what the story behind the mirror was, but in that foyer of my suite or section of the house, there's this giant mirror. And supposedly they've had it resilvered numerous times, but these handprints keep appearing. Yeah. And now, like, when you look at it, it's kind of just like spots. The handprints is a bit of a stretch. And I don't know the science of like silvering mirrors and with different atmospheres. And now that I've gone through, carpentry school and you see how like moisture and different things affect houses, I don't know like how that all comes into play. But it definitely makes for a good story. And
it does, cool. Yeah. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos are focused on the mirror, I think, because people will film the tour.
Yeah, I was trying to like do the same where I was taking pictures and videos, trying to see if anything.
But they say something. There's what looks like it's almost like 3 or 4 prints of a paw, or like a scratch, like a big claw is scratched, and then there's like dripping that they say kind of looks like blood. Across the mirror. And also people do these things where they take pictures of the mirror and certain parts of the room will get interesting reflections, which the skeptic in me is like, well, yeah, you're taking a picture of a mirror. Are you using a flash, or is it dusty, or are there people going in the background? There's a million things that can happen.
So there's a photo of the mirror. Especially they kind of look like more like smudges. Looking at them now.
But smudges allow your mind to kind of create things, but again, I don't mean that to be like it isn't haunted, because if it is, this is the place. I love that. Bill is showing me a picture of his Peter Venkman doll next to the haunted doll.
Yeah, which is funny because I'm looking at that, and then I was just on their website, and it looks like they redressed
the doll.
The doll, yeah, because look at in this photo, it's wearing like a red dress.
Oh yeah,
and that's a totally different.
I was
going
to say, is that just a different doll?
That looks like a different doll. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So did they talk? So they talked you through. Did they talk to you through the 17th step, or was that something Rich just told you about?
That was something I knew about, and I think he told us, on the tour. Like we went over our impromptu tour. He kind of went through and told us a bunch of those things. And
did anybody talk about Chloe besides the earrings? Because I know you saw the earrings in the chest.
Yeah. I mean, that was a big part of all the lore of everything. Yeah, it was everything that we'd already talked about, so there wasn't much new to report.
Did anybody else that stayed the night, did you get to talk to anybody like the next day and find out if they experienced anything?
No, I mean, other than that couple that we got to know, everyone kind of kept to themselves, really, and they didn't experience anything the next day. When I went back to retrieve the doll, and it's funny is I don't know whatever happened to that thing. Must have gave it away somewhere.
Ooh, yeah.
Maybe I just didn't pack it and schlep it back to LA or something. I don't know.
I would love if Peter Venkman was in the Myrtles to this day.
Oh, that'd be great.
That'd be amazing. So do you have, where do you stand today in terms of the Myrtles? I know you say you're in the middle of like believer, skeptic, whatever, but you want to believe. You're
I love going to the haunted places constantly. Like I love the tours of them. I'm always hoping, because I have so many friends that have firsthand experiences, and I'm always like, I want one to like see what it's like. So it's like one of those things where it's like, I'll believe it like when I see it, but I also really want to believe it. It's like I'm like Fox Mulder. I want to believe. But just haven't had anything presented to me yet. But then also like when I'm in that situation by myself, staying in that room, trying to fall asleep, you know, your mind plays tricks on you, and all of a sudden you're just like, everything is terrifying.
You can be the biggest skeptic in the world, and as soon as you're in there by yourself at night, I guarantee you, 98% of you will, you know.
Yeah, most people. I mean, we always did ghost hunting as kids. Like we lived near Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, which was like the most haunted cemetery in the country. So we would go there. You know, they had the whole St. Mary's, the Lady in White was also Resurrection Mary. Yeah, that was another one near us. But yeah, one of our friends, like we would dare him at night. We're like, all right, well, you got to go into the cemetery at night. So we would drive out there, and we're like, to prove it, you have to do a grave robbing. And he went in there, and he just went in like it was nothing. Like because he was super, super skeptical, and was just like, you guys are morons. And they're like, we'll give you $20 if you do. He's like, done, easy money. And
absolutely. I mean, the power of belief.
There was a point. So this is a great story. When we were first trying to find Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, me and a friend went, and there's Bachelor's Grove Woods, which are like maybe a quarter of a mile away from where the actual cemetery and all the parking and stuff was. But this is, again, we were in high school, so there wasn't a ton of, you know, internet research. It was just mostly those Chicago Haunts
because
books.
You're 72 years old.
Yeah. There was a great Chicago Haunts book that kind of laid out a lot of these things. So you're just following the descriptions. And me and him were walking around trying to find this cemetery, and we were so freaked out that we were jumping at every sound. There was another group of people. We're like, okay, maybe it's not that bad. There's other people around here. And then we later found out we're nowhere near this thing. So it was all just like the power of suggestion in our mind of just like where you were. So yeah.
Well, so obviously I did not stay there, so it's very different than the firsthand experience. But kind of where my conclusion, if you can even call it that, with the Myrtles Plantation is I still need to see more. You know, like I am still a skeptic, but even with learning the history, and sure enough, when you learn the history of any haunted place, it's like, oh yeah, that's not true. Oh yeah, that story's not true. Or I don't think Chloe ever existed. I think those happened probably in the 1950s. Someone started telling a story, and like we talked about earlier, the game of telephone develops this stuff. But even then, this is a plantation that is over 200 years old. Mm-hmm. There's been murder, for sure. We know of one. There's been people have died of yellow fever, probably way more than we know about because records are so terrible in the 1800s. It's a working plantation with slaves. And all we have is little anecdotal stories. How many slaves died?
In that area of the place they never even talk about.
How many were treated poorly? To me, there is something to say about an old Southern plantation that is still around with such a vibrant, dramatic history, to say that if ghosts are real, whether I believe them or not, if ghosts are real, I think the Myrtles Plantation should be on the list of like potential places. Like even though you didn't have your
it's
experience,
still worth checking out. It was still a cool building, just in like kind of creepy in its own right.
So go find out for yourselves. Any other final thoughts before we end?
No, I'm trying to remember if there was like a Ghost Hunters show that did an episode there.
There's a lot of Ghost Hunters shows.
But I mean, like I think the big one.
It was either Ghost Hunters, or especially, was it near the time you went?
I think it might have been maybe or after, I forget. But I remember one of them.
If it was near the time you went, it was probably Ghost Hunters.
Yeah, there was one that was like they were in like a cabin or something that I never even saw like for the episode.
Well, there's like the caretaker's cabin that they now rent out. And that's where supposedly, a caretaker was murdered.
Yeah, that might have been the one that they were.
So that might have been the one.
Which is weird because that's like, I don't know if that's like the most advertised story. It seems like the main house would have been more of a place to set things up.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe they did both. Maybe they did. I think I actually saw that. I think I saw the Ghost Hunters episode at Myrtles. I think they were in both. I think they went to a few different. I think they were even outside trying some experiments and things. What are your thoughts on the famous picture of the slave?
I haven't seen it in a while. Let's see. Turn it.
Like how I tried to turn my monitor.
I mean, it looks like there's a person there.
It does. You can kind of see through her. I was going to do this. You
can't remember. I think I took a photo of that same area just to.
The other one, there is a picture of a ghost in a window behind two women that I do not think is real at all. Like, I think someone used Photoshop and didn't even do a very good job.
Oh, I see.
So I have a lot of big issues with the picture of the girl in the window behind two ladies, because it looks like part of the glowing effect of the ghost is coming over the, like, the, what do you call those things? Window panes?
Yeah,
yeah.
I know the name.
Because if someone's using some kind of image editing system, they can't separate the curtain from the window panes to create two different layers and put a ghost in there.
Yeah, I mean, they could erase the ghostly image
from but they didn't, because look, it goes over.
But what if the ghost is coming through the window and it's on the other side? It's a ghost.
But yeah, I mean, if I was like $10,000, if you get the question correct, is that a ghost or not?
No, I don't know if I could say it was a real ghost. I guess if the question was, do you think this was photoshopped or not? Is a different question.
That's a good question.
That could be like, what if it was just a weird reflection off of something that was on the property? Mm-hmm. Then I would say, if it's between, like, is it photoshopped or is it a real photo? I'd probably say it's a real photo. If it's a ghost or not, I don't know. I wasn't there. So.
Yeah.
And also, I feel like sometimes during the day, ghosts, I don't know, do they hang out during the day as much?
Of course I mean, if ghosts are real, I don't think they're picking times. That's my personal theory. I don't think that photo is correct, and I know this is a podcast, so I will include a link to this photo in the show notes. Yeah. But it's one of the most famous photos of the Myrtles Plantation, with a ghost of a little girl in a window behind two women.
You should see if you can hire a forensic photo analysis to see if it's been photoshopped. They do that all the time with stuff.
I personally, maybe this is just a good thought to end on, I don't know. But I personally don't try to use photography as a means to, like, prove ghost or not, because I think there's so many fraudulent spirit photos.
Yeah.
And also,
there's so many ways to
manipulate it today. And also, I've been around film my whole life, like film and cameras, and the amount of weird things that your camera picks up because of a strange reflection, because of, if you're on film, something could be wrong with the frame. The way the light is reacting to the chemicals on it can mess up for a variety of reasons. In digital photography, people show things in the darkness all the time. I'm like, darkness is the light sensor is creating something when there's not enough data there.
That's true.
So it's literally something is creating something, and that's why you get noise and dark digital images. And so it's like you can't judge digital photography in dark. I know the photo we're talking about is not, it's actually in the day, which does help in that respect.
But one of our photos at Bachelor's Grove had, like, the orbs that you always see. Yep, but again, that could be, like, light reflecting off of moisture in the air.
Bugs, moisture, fog. There's literally an infinite amount of things. Yeah. So it's like, if you look at it scientifically, a ghost photo using,
like, the Pepper's ghost effect.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Things like that.
But if you look at things scientifically, you can't say every orb is some sort of spirit or energy manifestation of something paranormal. And that's just my personal feeling. But I love these things, and I want to find the truth behind them, and I do want them to be real. Yeah. So, like, I want people to open their minds and find new ways to investigate it. Maybe it has to all be personal experiences until technology can somehow catch up to it. But I guess to surmise everything is, visit the Myrtles Plantation if there are ghosts. This seems like a good spot. Yeah. So check it out, and we will end it, at least our portion, with Bill right now. Bill, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good one.
Before I end tonight's episode, something just happened to me that I have to share. I've already recorded with Bill. I'm in my office at my computer. I'm mixing sound. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to say in the outro and record that in a minute. And my office door just got pushed open from nothing. And my office door, if it's closed all the way and the latch is on it, it's very hard to open. Like, the handle is actually hard to turn. You have to push. You have to put a lot of weight into pushing the door open. If the door isn't closed all the way and is just kind of gently shut, which I do have it like that a lot of the time, it is still hard to open. It's an old door that kind of doesn't fit exactly correctly. You have to put a lot of weight into it. And it just got pushed open. And it got pushed open with some force. It wasn't, wind or a breeze that just kind of lightly touched it. It got pushed open pretty hard, which freaked me out, because I'm listening to the Myrtles Plantation episode as I'm sitting here. The next thing that happened, just maybe 2-3 minutes later, I started hearing voices that I cannot pinpoint where they came from, and they sounded like they were in my office. Now, I'm not saying they're ghosts. I'm already racking my brain with all sorts of different possibilities of what that could be. Maybe this even feeds into my theory of how suggestion can actually be a very powerful source of ghost experiences. But I'm a little freaked out, and I thought everybody might enjoy to hear that. Thank you for listening to tonight's episode. We're going to have more spooky paranormal stuff throughout October. Also, we did not plug Bill's work with Bill right here, which is my fault. Bill is a co-founder along with Matthew Lillard, who you'll recognize his name from a ton of movie and TV. They co-founded an independent movie studio called Midnite Movie Club, Midnite, and they're doing amazing things that I'm not going to do justice trying to explain. So please visit midnitemovieclub.com. I will provide links to that in the show notes as well. If you're into indie movies, if you want to work in movies, or you want to have a say in the movies you watch, you should go check out Midnite Movie Club. If you're enjoying this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. If you want to find other ways to support us so that we can keep making content for you, you can follow us on Instagram at A Study of Strange. You can email me thoughts, ideas, notes, stories at astudyofstrange@gmail.com. And lastly, you can support us on Patreon, where we have exclusive content. There's a special giveaway going on right now with a personalized video, and you can find that through our website, astudyofstrange.com. I'm also going to release some additional kind of personal scary stories on Patreon throughout October in celebration of Halloween, the best holiday. Thank you all again for listening, and good night.